Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to give everyone a few minutes. We're going to start right at 12:04-ish. And I have my colleagues here from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Hector and Lisa. And so we are delighted to have you all. So if you haven't gotten your last bit of coffee or water, go ahead and grab that. We're going to give people some time to join, but don't fear, we'll start right at 12:04. And we're, like I said, excited to have you. If we can go ahead and get the closed captioning turned on for folks, if that's not on. And then if you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, by all means, do that so we can get to know you. But we're going to ask some welcoming questions when we begin. So thanks, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're joining us from. Well, wonderful. Hello, good morning, and good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Rachel Gibson, and I'm with the National Center for Victims of Crime. Here at the National Center, we are just so delighted to have our partners from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And if you're not familiar with the National Center, we are one of the nation's oldest victim advocacy organizations where we serve all victims of crime whenever they've been a victim of crime. And we operate a 9-to-5 helpline Monday through Friday, our Victim Connect Resource Center, that provides great resources to anyone who is a victim of crime. And part of our work is also providing webinars, training, technical assistance to victim service providers. And when we say victim service providers, we mean anyone who's going to work with the victim in a professional way. So I always tell people, from tattoo artists to SANE nurses, court professionals, judges, community advocates, victim advocates in court-based systems, bank professionals, anyone who will professionally provide a victim of crime with support. And so that's just a little bit about the National Center. Before we begin, I do have a few housekeeping things to note. For those of you who are joining today, we want to make sure you're in the right place. So you are attending the Recovering from Elder Financial Exploitation webinar. Some things to remember: this webinar is being recorded. So if you have concerns about your privacy, please do not type anything in the chat function. The recording an evaluation, and any materials will be shared in the post-webinar follow-up in the next few weeks. So I want to repeat that because I know somebody's going to ask again. You will get the recording, you will get any materials mentioned today, and an evaluation at the end of the webinar in the next couple of weeks. You should be able to hear me, but I shouldn't be able to hear you. If you cannot hear or have any connectivity issues, please send a message to Dashiell Coleman, and their information is listed in the chat. We are not able to give out certificates, but do not despair. We are working with our CE and CLE partners to begin to provide CEs for our webinar, so stay on the lookout for that. Last but not least, we'll have live transcription. So if you need the transcription, you can go ahead and turn that on at the bottom of your screen. We also have our Q&A area. So if you have any questions throughout the course of the webinar, go ahead and use that QA. That helps us manage the questions and ensures we don't lose any of them in the chat function. So let's use the chat for chatting, and any questions that you have, please put it in the Q&A pod. Our presenters have asked that if you do have questions, we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. So like I said, we are delighted to have our friends from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to discuss financial recovery framework and how and when older adults get money back after financial exploitation. I'm joined today by Dr. Hector L. Ortiz, who is a Senior Policy Analyst at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Office for Older Americans, where he leads research projects on financial literacy and well-being, retirement security, and elder financial exploitation. He's joined by his colleague, Lisa Schifferly, who is a JD and is a Senior Policy Analyst in the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. Lisa leads the Managing Someone Else's Money financial caregiving program, as well as the Money Smart for Older Adults program. She also supports the office's work to combat elder financial exploitation through network collaboration and age-friendly banking. So before I turn it over to my colleagues, let's go ahead and launch our poll. And so we would love to hear from you all. Where are you all coming from? What is your profession? Are you a victim service provider, older adult advocate, financial professional, court professional, adult protective services, or other? So go ahead and click the options in our poll. And once we get a few responses, we'll go ahead and launch and see where everyone is coming from. Just want to make sure everyone knows you can click on the polling option that should be displayed on your screen. If you have trouble seeing that, just let us know. So we might need to launch that poll. Looks like folks aren't able to see it. Might be a button at the bottom of the screen. Regardless, I see folks are being intuitive and using the chat function, so great. I'll go ahead and just read a few of where those folks are coming from. We've got some folks from Arizona doing financial exploitation work. We've got a professor out of doing academic work. We've got some social workers, adult protective services. There we go. There's that poll. And so we've got adult protective services here. We've got victim service providers, a lot of victim service providers, older adult advocates, a couple of court professionals, thank you. Folks doing tribal work. I love to see our colleagues from tribal communities joining us today. Shameless plug, we will be doing a tribal specific financial fraud panel discussion in July. So if you are interested in that, stay tuned for that. We've got legal services as well. We've got some friends, colleagues from Florida doing domestic violence work. So wonderful. That's great. So thank you all again very much for joining. We'll go ahead and have our PowerPoint launch, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues, Lisa and Hector. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. AC day here in Washington, D.C. Hope your air is better than ours. Today, we're going to share with you the work that we have done to understand the financial recovery of victims of elder financial exploitation. Our work focuses on that particular concept and experience of recovery, which is understanding the factors that are associated with recovery, as well as whether people are able to financially recover from elder financial exploitation. We're looking at a question that is in many people's mind, that is, how likely are you to get your money back if you have been scammed or financially exploited? The support that all of you provide to victims is a key component of that process, because we know there's a significant impact of financial exploitation on the emotional and physical well-being of individuals. Financial losses are not just simply financial losses. It has other consequences like hardships, missed bills. And we also know that as you'll see today too, that the recovery process is complex, disheartening, and the support that you provide is key and empowering. Next slide. Before I begin this presentation, I have to disclaim for me and my colleague Lisa that our presentation today is done on behalf of the CFPB. However, we may express our own opinions and may not necessarily reflect the opinions of the agency. Next slide. Okay, so a little bit more about the CFPB. Our agency is a relatively new federal agency. We just recently celebrated our 10th anniversary. Our focus is to enforce the consumer financial laws and making sure that products are fair, transparent, and competitive. And we basically make sure that banks and lenders are treating everyone fairly. Because of that mandate, we work very closely with financial institutions, which are often involved, or their products or their staff are first responders in cases of elder financial exploitation and scams. Next slide. Within the CFPB, there's an office that is specifically focused on older adults. Our office, the Office for Older Americans, develops resources for older adults to protect themselves from financial harm. We work with organizations across the United States in this effort. We also help consumers make better financial choices that align, again, with their financial goals. You can find more information about our work at consumerfinance.gov/older Americans. The topic of elder financial exploitation is of particular importance to our office, and this issue of recovery is certainly one that we were very interested to learn, and this is why we pursued this study. Next slide. Today we're going to cover a summary of the study, but if you're interested in learning more, I believe the link to the report was shared with all of you, and you can see it here in consumerfinance.gov/EFE-report. And there you can find more detailed information about the findings, as well as the implications of our work. Next slide. As I said, our work, it's the issue of elder financial exploitation has been of great concern, not just to us, but all of you and the entire aging and victim support network. And I want to start first describing what we mean by elder financial exploitation in today's conversation. We're talking about the illegal and improper use of an older adult's assets and money. And we know that this is the most common form of elder abuse in the United States compared to other forms like physical abuse or neglect. And it can include both exploitation. In this particular presentation today, we're not limiting it to the people who are known to the victim, but also those strangers, individuals who are located overseas. And we, again, are looking both at both modalities of elder financial exploitation. Next slide. As this slide shows, elder financial exploitation, doesn't matter what study you look at, we find pretty significant losses involved in cases of elder financial exploitation. The overall estimates range from 1.7 billion to 36, and that is all a function of how you what you include in the definition of elder financial exploitation, what types of crimes are included. But one thing is pretty consistent, that despite this huge variation in the estimate, when you look at the individual level averages, the losses are pretty high, and that's of great concern. And we know, again, that this is just a financial impact. We know that they have significant impact to the health, the emotional well-being of individuals, and there's longstanding research around the effect on healthcare, eligibility for public benefits, housing experiences, food insecurity, credit, and for some, even the ability to retire. Next slide. So we know that the literature is in this space is pretty limited. When we started this project, we began with research on what we know about the topic. And it was mostly experts and professionals like you who spoke with us. And there was a general agreement that older adults who experience elder financial exploitation very rarely lost the money that they recovered the money that they have lost. So that's why we were so interested in the experience, the process of recovery, what's associated with it, how people, again, recover the money that they have lost. And you will see that today we will draw some policy recommendations out of that work. Next. I'll talk a little bit more about how we went about to gather those experiences from older adults and other key players in the recovery process. Next slide. We had a two-phase. This whole study was conducted between August of 2020 and December of 2021. And in the first phase, we conducted a literature review, and in the second phase, we did a qualitative research consisting of one-on-one interviews with 43 participants, so older adults, where 31 of those participants were older adults, and 12 of them were professionals in the elder financial exploitation space. And we looked at in choosing those, the older adults to interview, we looked at three specific dimensions. I think we may have skipped one slide. Yes, perfect, thank you. We looked at three criteria in selecting the participants of our interviews because we wanted to try to get balance on these three important factors that were named by the literature, but also professionals that we interviewed and other researchers. First, we looked at the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator, and we wanted to get both people who had lost money in a transaction or a situation where the perpetrator was known to them and those that were not known to them. We also wanted to know we also wanted to have both cases where the individual was able to successfully recover the money, but cases also where the individual was unable to do so, so that we have both experiences of the process of recovery as well as the inability to recover. And the last piece was the amount of money lost. That is that was an important piece of the literature. We know that again there's a wide variation in the amount of money that it's involved in these cases. So we wanted to understand, is this associated with lower amounts involved, like $100 versus when you're looking at cases involving 10,000 or more. Again, next slide. We, in addition to the older adults, we significantly supplemented this with the professional experience, the people who help navigate the recovery process. So we have a wide variety of professionals listed here. We, as you can see, we had professionals that directly worked on investigation. Some of those are individuals that are the first ones that get the report of the crime, but as you can see, legal services, fraud hotline operators, FBI, financial counselors, detectives. Now I will turn to my colleague Lisa that will go into the details of what we found in this research. Lisa.
Thanks so much, Hector, and thanks again to NCVC for inviting us here today to present about our financial recovery framework. Like Hector said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the findings of our study. Next slide, please. And perfect. So based on our interviews, we noted that there were 4 stages to the recovery process, each of which have factors that can affect whether someone gets their money back or not. The first stage is identification, basically whether people realize that a crime has occurred and what factors impact whether they realize that. The second stage is reporting, what factors affect whether people report or not. Third stage is investigation, and we looked at what affects whether the case actually goes on to get investigated once it is reported. And finally is return of funds. So even if you get through identifying, reporting, and investigation, then we looked at the factors that affect whether people actually get their money back. So let's look at each of the stages in turn. In the first stage on the next slide, you'll see who are the players in terms of identification. And a lot of you on this call are probably players in the field in terms of identification. And we want to thank you for all the work you do to help crime victims, especially victims of elder financial exploitation. And recognizing that it is a crime is a big step to this, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But first, who are the people who play a role in terms of whether an older adult identifies that a crime has occurred and that elder financial exploitation has occurred? They can include the older adult themselves. Sometimes caregivers, family members, or friends notice it. Sometimes service providers like healthcare workers or victim services workers may notice it. Sometimes it'll be a financial institution, or other times it may be law enforcement. So what are the factors that our interviews identified as affecting whether people actually identify elder financial exploitation? On the next slide, you'll see some of those factors, and they include the method of the transaction. So for example, if someone paid a scammer or someone who was exploiting them by credit card, then we found that they're often more likely to identify it and more likely to recover. Sometimes, in fact, it's the credit card company who will identify the fraud for them and call the older adult and say that they've noticed something suspicious on their account. Also, someone's personal financial situation may affect whether they identify or not. For example, someone with limited income may be more likely to notice any amount of money that was lost, whereas someone who's wealthier may not notice a smaller dollar loss, especially depending on the person's attention to their finances, whether they pay close attention or not. And often if you're living paycheck to paycheck and know that any amount of difference can make a difference about whether you can pay rent or mortgage, then sometimes those people are more likely to pay attention to their finances and to notice and identify this. Another factor that can affect identification is whether the older adult knew the perpetrator. If it's a stranger scam, sometimes they may be more likely to recognize it than if a family member is doing it. They might just think, oh, that family member's going through issues, or this is just a family issue, and not actually think of it as a crime or exploitation. Another factor is sometimes even if the older adult does not know the perpetrator and it's a stranger scam, if it's a scam like romance scams, we know that those are ones where it's hard to convince the individual that it was a scam. So they are not usually likely to identify it as a scam when it's a romance scam. Usually a family member or someone else will be the one to point it out to them. Finally, the victim's health, including both their physical health and cognitive decline, if there is any, may affect whether they are able to identify the elder financial exploitation. So that's the first stage of identification. And on the next stage, on the next slide, you'll see that the second step in the framework is reporting, because once somebody recognizes elder financial exploitation, do they report it or not? And we know that elder financial exploitation is underreported. So we looked at what are some of the factors that play into whether people report and who are the players that have key roles in terms of receiving reports and making sure that reports do happen. This slide shows some of those key players, including Adult Protective Services, which a lot of you are on this call, and we thank you for your work and for listening to this presentation and hope that it helps inform your further work. Financial institutions are also often involved in reporting. Sometimes people hopefully will report any fraud loss to the financial institution that was involved in terms of the transaction. If they sent a bank transfer or a credit card or peer-to-peer, they would hopefully report it to that financial institution. People can also report to helplines and to state, local, and federal law enforcement, including the Federal Trade Commission and IC3. On the next slide, you'll see some of the factors that our interviews identified as affecting whether people do report or not. And you all have probably seen some of these in your work with crime victims. Again, the financial factors like the method and amount of the transaction can come into play. If it's a credit card, again, people may be more likely to report because a credit card company may be notifying them. So it's much easier to report it, or really the credit card company themselves have reported it. Again, the financial situation of the individual may come into play. If they really need the money, they're more likely to go through the trouble to report it than someone who has a financial cushion and might think, oh, this is not worth my time or energy to report and pursue. Another big factor, again, is whether the victim knows the perpetrator, because if they do, they may be reluctant to report it because they sometimes don't want that person who they know to be affected by the reporting. If it's a family member who's exploiting them, and oftentimes that can be the case if it's an adult son or daughter who's the caregiver and who's exploiting them, they may not want that person to get in trouble. They may feel sorry for them if they have a drug or alcohol or gambling problem, which they are using the stolen money from the older adult to fuel that addiction, which is something fairly common. So the older adult may feel sorry for the family member, may not want that family member to get in trouble, or may just have a sense of, this is a family issue, I don't want to report it, it's just for family to deal with within the family. We also found in terms of reporting that as if any of you have read the recent AARP FINRA report on victim blaming, you know that some older adults are ashamed or embarrassed or blame themselves for what happened. And you probably know that just from your own work as well. So if you're ashamed or embarrassed, then you're not as likely to report. So it's really important, as AARP and FINRA point out, to make sure that when we are dealing with crime victims, including victims of elder financial exploitation, that we use language that is not blaming them, but acknowledging that this is a crime. And I'm sure you all are leaders in doing that, but it's important for you to also remind others in the field about the language they use and about the fact that elder financial exploitation is a crime and should be treated as such, rather than saying, oh, that person fell for it, saying, no, some criminal just stole all their money. So some other factors that we look at here are if someone is in poor health, then they might not have the time or desire to deal with the financial issue, especially as some said, if they thought they had only a few years to live, then they said that they didn't want to chase down the money during those last few years. That wasn't how they wanted to spend their time. Another really interesting finding that we had in terms of reporting is that faith and authorities played a big role, especially for LGBTQ plus people or people of color who had had prior negative experience with the local police. In other contexts, we had some people say that they didn't want to get the police involved in this issue either because of their prior negative experience and because they thought they might be treated less than favorably due to their sexual orientation or race. Another factor that we saw in terms of reporting and heard about in our interviews is the training and interactions with service providers and financial institutions can play a role. For example, if service providers or financial institutions tip off the older adult to the elder financial exploitation and tell them to report. Sometimes they identify it, but don't know where to report. So that can be another great factor and way that victim service coordinators can play a role, is making sure that people know where to report and to report to financial institutions, to FTC, to IC3, to APS, and others. So that covers the first two factors in our framework. First, you have to identify the fraud occurred, then it has to be reported. And then if you get over those hurdles, and we know, like I said before, that not all of these instances get reported. In fact, a lot of them don't, but say it does get reported, then the third stage on the next slide you'll see is investigation. So the players here, again, include financial institutions, law enforcement, adult protective services, multidisciplinary teams. Sometimes it can involve prosecutors and even civil attorneys. Our framework looked at the factors that affect this stage too, and whether the crime of elder financial exploitation actually gets investigated. So you can start to see why recovery is so difficult, because first there are factors that might keep people from identifying it. Then there are factors that might keep people from reporting it. Then if you get a case of elder financial exploitation that is properly identified and reported, you still have to get through the next two stages, investigation and return of funds. So let's look at the factors that affect whether a case gets investigated. On the next slide, you'll see some key factors that come to play. Many of them are the cross-cutting factors that you saw in the earlier stages, like the method and amount of the transaction, the person's financial situation, their relationship with the perpetrator, and their health or their shame or embarrassment. Those can all affect whether someone pursues investigation. But a couple of factors that are unique to the investigatory stage that I want to point out are that the complexity of the investigation affects oftentimes whether it gets investigated. If it's a very complex case, especially with overseas defendants, it may not get investigated. Also, if the amount of loss is low, it may be a lower priority for investigators, even if it's a high priority to the individual. Also, it may have to do with what other priorities that particular law enforcement agency has at the time. If they have a lot of violent crimes going on, they may be less likely to investigate financial crimes or have the resources and staffing to do so. Finally, investigators' training and resources affect whether an investigation proceeds. If investigators are properly trained and have good resources and good coordination, then you're more likely to see an investigation happen. So that's stage 3. Let's turn to the 4th and final stage of the recovery framework. On the next slide, you'll see, this is good, this slide shows ways that older adults get their money back. They may get their money back through a charge reversal if the credit card company reverses the charge once fraud is identified. They might get it back through direct payment. The perpetrator might directly repay the older adult, especially if it's somebody who they know and they do work it out with that individual. They may just repay the older adult. If there's a civil case brought, then the older adult might get their money back through civil collection methods. And if there's a criminal case brought, they may get money back through restitution. Also, there can be payouts from class action lawsuits or federal enforcement acts. If you heard about the Western Union case, that was a case that federal law enforcement brought that basically said that Western Union was turning a blind eye when it was allowing people to use their wire transfer services to wire money to scammers when they knew it was going to scammers. And as a result of that, a lot of people got money back that they had paid to scammers over years in the past. So that's another example of ways that funds might get returned to people. So on the next slide, we'll see the factors that we found affect a return of funds to older adults. As you'll see, again, the first 5 or 6 bullets cover those cross-cutting factors that we've seen in the other stages. But some key factors in terms of the return of funds include the perpetrator's ability to repay. As Hector mentioned, we talk not only to survivors of this crime of elder financial exploitation, but we also talk to professionals. And professionals in particular noted that oftentimes by the time the perpetrator's caught, the money's gone. And that perpetrator may not have other assets to repay the older adult with if they've already spent the money that they stole from the older adult. Prosecutors also noted that even when the court orders repayment, sometimes there's a repayment plan with very small amounts paid monthly over time, often over a period of years, sometimes based on the perpetrator's ability to repay or inability to repay. So you can see that especially for older adults, sometimes waiting years for repayment may even mean that they pass away before a substantial portion of the money is repaid. And that's if they get through all of the stages of recovery. They've identified it, they've reported it, it got investigated, and they actually got an order saying it should be returned. They may not actually end up getting all of the funds, but they may. And that's why we're looking at the factors. And on the next slide, you'll see some of the cross-cutting factors that affect all stages of elder financial exploitation. And we point these out not to paint a depressing picture about how hard it is to recover from elder financial exploitation, but to give everyone in the field a better idea of what are those factors. And if we can affect some of those factors, then people will be more likely to identify it. They'll be more likely to report it. It'll be more likely to get investigated. And ultimately, they'll be more likely to get their money back. So here are the 8 cross-cutting factors that we've mentioned throughout each of the 4 stages. Those include the relationship, health, social support networks we haven't talked about, but if someone's socially isolated, they're less likely to notice the fraud and report it and recover. And then some of the other things we mentioned about the location of the perpetrator, whether responders have training and resources to investigate and prosecute, and things like the method and amount of transaction and the personal situation. So that's a summary of our findings. I want to turn next to some implications for policy and research that we outlined in our report. Next slide, please. So in addition to setting out a framework for looking at recovery from elder financial exploitation, our report does look at some of the policy implications that we can draw from our findings. And also, since our study was a qualitative one, as Hector explained, we also recognize there's need for additional research. So let me tell you a bit about some of the policy implications that we noticed. For example, in terms of prosecution, there is a need for more publicity of successful prosecutions so that people can see that they sometimes do get money back, and then they may be more likely to report it and more likely to pursue recovery. if they know that people do get money back, it won't seem as hopeless and they may be more likely to pursue it. So really promoting those successful cases where people get the money back and publicizing them better would be helpful. Another possible policy implication is considering alternatives to prosecution, especially when the perpetrator is a family member or someone the older adult knows. As I mentioned, people may be reluctant to report people they know if they think they're going to go to jail for it. So if there were alternatives to prosecution, then older adults and others might be more likely to report family members and loved ones who are exploiting them. Other policy implications we noted is that it would be helpful to have more training for law enforcement, for APS, for financial institutions. Everyone who is a key player in this field, having more training is always helpful. In addition, greater consumer protections for some of the payment methods like peer-to-peer and gift cards. As I mentioned, with some payment methods, you're going to be more likely to recover, like credit cards, because they have more legal protections. But some of these others, we may want to look at greater consumer protections for so that people would be more likely to get their money back. In addition, more consumer education for older adults and their caregivers about how to identify and report elder financial exploitation would be helpful. On the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about some of the research implications of our report and our study. Our study was qualitative. It was based on interviews. So we believe there's still need for a quantitative analysis, perhaps using data from agencies like APS or data from financial institutions. Also, our study looks at particular individual factors, some of the factors we laid out today, but it would also be interesting to learn about more of the connections between those factors and how do they interplay with each other. Finally, given the size of our study, we were not able to get as wide a representation across races or genders, so further study on those aspects would be helpful too. So we really see this report as a starting point, as guidance to industry and to researchers and to policymakers. And we hope that you all will take what you learned today and take it to the next step. On the next slide, you'll see a panel of esteemed experts who we were very fortunate to have assisting us throughout the whole process. They helped with the literature review, they helped with the interviews, and they helped with reviewing a final draft of the report. And you'll see on this slide some of the leaders in the field of elder financial exploitation prevention, and we're very grateful to all of them for their help with this report. Now, before we get to your questions, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the tools that the CFPB has for preventing scams and elder financial exploitation, because hopefully those will be helpful to you all in your work as well. Next slide, please. And the slide after that. So this slide shows some of the resources we have at the CFPB to help educate older adults, caregivers, professionals, and financial institutions about how to recognize and avoid elder financial exploitation. You can find them all at consumerfinance.gov/older-Americans. They're available in English and in Spanish, and you can order them in bulk for free. If you go to consumerfinance.gov/order, that'll take you right to our order page. But before I tell you a little more about the resources, I want to share a few other ways we at CFPB are working to protect older consumers from fraud losses. The first is holding companies accountable for failing to protect consumers through our enforcement actions. In fact, you may have heard of the Brightspeed case, where we held a payment processor accountable for their role in allowing tech support scammers to use their digital payment platform to scam older consumers. Much like the Western Union case, we alleged that Brightspeed was turning a blind eye to allowing their system to be used for older adults to pay scammers. And so we were able to get an order against Brightspeed in that case. Another way we're working to combat elder financial exploitation is by making sure that consumers get quality customer care. So we're looking into how financial institutions respond to their customers when problems do arise. In addition, we're helping to improve reporting and response by financial institutions. Hopefully, some of you have seen some of the reports we've done dating back to 2013. We have guidance and recommendations for financial institutions on how to report elder financial exploitation, how to share financial records with local investigators, and how to file effective suspicious activity reports involving elder financial exploitation. In addition, we are working to build local capacity and coordinated response in communities across the nation through our network development program. Some of you on this call may even be a part of a local network where these networks involve people from APS, from law enforcement, from victim services, who are all working together to combat elder financial exploitation in their communities. In addition, we're always looking to try to anticipate and respond to new challenges and how scammers steal people's money by identifying new payment methods like peer-to-peer and cryptocurrency and studying those as well. And finally, we have the consumer education pieces, which I'm going to now highlight for you. On the next slide, you'll see our Money Smart for Older Adults series. This is one of our bread and butter series from the Office for Older Americans on how to prevent elder financial exploitation. And Money Smart is a scam awareness program we developed together with the FDIC. It has an instructor guide, so it's really designed for train the trainer. If you go out in the community and give presentations on fraud and scams, then this is a great resource for you. The instructor guide will tell you everything you need to know to give your own presentation. It even has a PowerPoint. We have them in English and in Spanish. And then there's a resource guide that can be handed out to individuals in the audience. Or if you don't give presentations, you can simply order copies of the resource guide, which covers a variety of different fraud and scams and how to recognize and avoid them. On the next slide, you'll see information about our network development guide. This is a guide that we've developed for people who are part of networks in their local communities or people who want to form a network in their local community to combat elder financial exploitation. So this online network development guide gives you everything you need in terms of how to plan a retreat or a convening, how to host it, and how to establish your network. And it walks you through step by step. It has things like interactive timelines for planning an event. It has a lot of activities you can do at these events, and is really made to make it easy for you to either build or start a network. On the next slide, you'll see contact information for our Elder Networks program. If you are interested in establishing a network in your area, you can reach out to us and we can try to give you more information and also add you to our list for updates and training opportunities for elder networks. The next slide shows our fraud prevention handouts. This is the last resource I want to highlight for you before we get to your questions. And these were originally designed for meal service providers, places like Meals on Wheels, so that people would get, along with the meal delivered in their house, they would get a brightly colored placemat underneath that had a fraud prevention message on it. We found that these were so successful and people liked them so much that we also converted them into handouts and posters and bookmarks so that people could use them in other respects in addition to placemats. So they cover a whole variety of different scams, grandparent scams, online safety, government scams. Some of them have word games and crossword puzzles and interactive activities. And they are available in English and in Spanish. They're great materials to hand out at a local community center, faith-based organization. Good to hand out if you're doing a Money Smart for Older Adults presentation as well. And so we encourage you all to order them at consumerfinance.gov/order. It's all free for you to order. On the last slide here, you'll see information about where to contact us. The report that Hector and I have discussed is available at consumerfinance.gov/EFE-report. You can also find all the resources I discussed at consumerfinance.gov/older Americans, plus a lot more. We're just focusing on one small aspect of all of the Office for Older Americans work. So you'll find a lot of helpful resources there. I encourage you to check it out. And last but not least is our email address. If you want additional information, you can contact us at olderamericans@cfpb.gov. And so with that, we are happy to take your questions, and we do look forward to working with you and others across the country to look for more ways that older adults can avoid elder financial exploitation and recover from financial exploitation when it does happen.
Well, thank you, Lisa and Hector. I know I learned something as well, so I'm delighted and so appreciative of everybody joining in today. We've got some great questions that came in through the Q&A. If you have questions, go ahead and use that Q&A function and not the chat function, because it's hard for us to sort of see as everyone's typing in the chat. So I'll start with our first question, which I think is really sort of poignant for folks and can really get the conversation going. A lot of folks mention that a carceral or incarceration is not always the safest option for those who are perpetrating crime, as well as for those who are being victimized by friends or family members that are close to them. And so can we talk about some options that may be great for folks? I know some folks may want to consider a civil option, or are there other forms of recourse that do not include sort of going necessarily to law enforcement if someone doesn't feel like that's the option for them?
Yes, that is a great question. I'll start, and then Hector may have more to answer. And that is part of the reason why in the policy implications, we did suggest that alternatives to prosecution and the resulting incarceration are a good policy thing to look at. There are restorative justice frameworks that sometimes can be used instead of prosecution. In addition, like you said, Rachel, sometimes people could pursue a civil recovery, which would not necessarily involve criminal action, so they could get their money back without pursuing prosecution. Sometimes they can work it out with the individual, especially if it's someone they know, so that they get repaid directly. Another thing that someone could do theoretically is to say, you know, I could try to prosecute you for this, but if you want to resolve it amicably, then, you know, here's what needs to be paid. But you need to also look very carefully at laws, because you don't want to be bribing or extorting anyone. But there is a way to do it in terms of a negotiation, saying, you know, like a demand letter saying, I will sue you civilly. If you don't want to be sued, then you can pay me back. And then, of course, the person doesn't have to ever pursue the option if they aren't paid back. But it can be a way to try to get their money paid back to them.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you for that. I don't know, Hector, if you have anything. If not, I'll go to another big question that we had, which is not just specific to this webinar, but I've been hearing it from our participants on the last couple of webinars, which is, how do we get financial institutions involved? A lot of folks are saying they struggle with getting their community partners. And I always, if you've ever been on a webinar with me, you heard me talking about bringing everybody to the table. So your financial abuse, your FAST teams, or your MDTs, or bankers, or law enforcement. I know a lot of our community members struggle with getting even law enforcement just to sort of take it seriously that a crime has happened. They have told advocates and victims, well, you willingly gave the money, and so you're not really a victim because you knew what you were doing. And so how do programs start to have conversations with community partners on sort of understanding what these issues are and getting them involved?
Do you want to start, Hector, since you've done a lot of that work on financial institutions and suspicious activity reports?
So I was going to say, Lisa, since you have been working on developing networks in the community, you'll be able to provide sort of the practice. But the fundamental is both. Financial institutions are often first first-hand observers, so they see what's going on. Their products are involved, and in many cases they're on the hook for losses too. So there is a vested interest in them in being part of the of collaborations, from like helping you know, like whether it's law enforcement or the community, to alert of scams that they're seeing, so that people know that in some cases they're being impersonated, so the trust is undermined for those institutions. So those are part of the argument. But I think your point, Rachel, of misunderstanding, of not knowing each other, and so in some cases this is where we need community collaboration. This is when we need them to at least participate in a workshop where everyone is able to talk about how this affects each one of those partners. And that is one thing that we're doing at the CFPB. But I will say that one key ingredient of that is you need an authority to bring people together. And often it will have to be your state regulator or a law enforcement, like your AG office, to serve as the convener. And often once that happens, you do have the motivation to pursue. Lisa has been working on a project precisely to foster that type of community collaboration.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about that just to add to what Hector said. So we are now very actively developing our Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Network project. We just had 2 webinar series, one in February and one in May, that have had over 10,000 attendees now. And what we're trying to do there is just to help facilitate collaboration within communities across the country, between law enforcement, between financial institutions, between victim services coordinators, because it's really important on the ground to just know who the person is at the bank in your area that you can call. I was a legal services attorney before coming to the federal government, and a big part of being successful in that role is knowing who's the person at this entity who you can call, who will actually cut through the red tape and help you. So developing those relationships in your local community is very key, and that's what the networks are designed to try to do, to help facilitate that with regard to financial institutions and others. And then in addition, as Hector was mentioning, the CFPB has put out a lot of guidance for financial institutions about reporting suspicious activity reports and reminding them to not only file the suspicious activity report, but also report to APS and others when they do so, so that the whole larger community is brought in and able to help the older adults. And it's not just like, oh, I've satisfied my obligation by filing this report, but I've actually then taken the next step to make sure that the individual gets the help they need.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And I think we could spend more time going over questions, but we're almost out of time. But I do want to address this one last question, because we have heard this one a lot as well. And that is, sorry, scrolling down. Are there any recommendations for repeat victims? We know chronic fraud victimization is one of the sort of components. If you've ever been to our Taking Action webinars, we talk a lot about that, where people who are consistently being victimized by fraud, they don't often. I have a family friend who lives with disabilities, and he's consistently giving his money to someone he believes is a lover. And we are consistently saying, no, this is not a real person, but they've built that relationship. And so what can providers, service providers, APS, what can folks do to really help have these conversations if someone is a repeat victim?
That's a great question. There are 2 things that come to mind for me right away. And one of them is to make sure that they know about the scams that are at play, because research does show if you can recognize a certain particular scam, you're less likely to lose money to it. But of course, that's just a first step. And obviously for people who are repeat victims, sometimes that step alone is not enough. So there also are other protections you can put in place. Like if the person has an investment account, you can put what's called a trusted contact on the account so that that person would be notified if there are signs of financial exploitation, and that can help prevent a lot of elder financial exploitation before it happens, because if the financial institution flags it, they'll contact that trusted contact person. There also are things like credit freezes that the individual might want to consider so that somebody else can't open new credit in their name. So there are protections like that that people may want to put into place, as well as making sure they have a power of attorney lined up so that if they get to the point where they can no longer manage their own finances, they have somebody who they trust who can.
I'll add two things. So you should check AARP wrote precisely a report on this chronic victimization issue and describes a little bit the sort of the different types of experiences and factors associated. It's probably one of the most complex issues here because it involves a wide range of characteristics and predispositions on certain individuals. But there's one thing that I just want to say, that often like sequential victimization happens to when someone is a victim of a crime, and then there's immediately assistance offered to help recover the money. And that is one thing that I want to say related to this webinar, is we have to be careful about those two, that we have to educate that you are the trusted sources, that the actual financial institution is the trusted source, that law enforcement is the trusted source, because often they will get a call from an attorney saying, we're going to help you get that money back. And it's really another step on the scam to continue the victimization.
Well, we're just a little over time, but I know y'all enjoyed it, so I went ahead and let us do it. So just a few closing things. You all have asked for a lot of the reports that Lisa and Hector have mentioned, so I'll ask them to share that. What we'll do is we'll compile this and get them to get us those links, and we'll put that in the follow-up information as well. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, go ahead and do that. I put that link in the chat because you're going to get access to not only sort of a list of this information, but like I said, we're going to be hosting webinars around the topic of financial fraud, abuse, and exploitation for the rest of the year. For those of you who had questions, I'll get with our presenters to see if we can get some of those answered, but never fear. At the end of the year, I'm actually going to be hosting thank you, Hector. I'll be hosting a webinar on FAQs around financial fraud, abuse, and exploitation, taking all of the questions we've done in the last 2 years and compiling them, and then again, getting with some of our experts to get those answered. So be on the lookout for that. We're also going to be doing one around serving tribal communities, as well as connecting with our law enforcement friends to see if we can get them to join a conversation about how we can bridge the gap between programs and service providers and law enforcement around this topic. So like I said, I will make sure you get our newsletter information in that follow-up as well. You will get the recording, you will get all the materials, and I'll get with Lisa and Hector and make sure we can share a PDF of the PowerPoint. Folks have asked for that. And so if they are agreeable, we'll get that in the follow-up materials. But besides that, most importantly, give yourselves a round of applause for joining today. I appreciate each and every one of you and the work that you do on behalf of victims and survivors of crime. Thank you to Lisa and Hector and everyone over at CFPB for just being willing to do this webinar with us. And we will see you all I believe our next webinar is July 17th, and we'll make sure you get that information, but we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.